The steady beep of the heart monitor filled the quiet hospital room, each sound a fragile reminder that Daniel was still alive. Machines surrounded him, blinking and humming in a rhythm that felt both reassuring and terrifying. His chest rose and fell slowly, assisted by the oxygen flowing through thin tubes. To anyone passing by, it looked like a scene balanced between hope and despair. Beside the bed sat Emma. She leaned casually against the railing, one hand resting on the cold metal, the other holding her phone to her ear. A bright smile spread across her face as she laughed softly, twirling a strand of her hair as if she were sitting in a cafe instead of a hospital room. "No, you don't understand," she said, her voice light and playful. "It's actually going better than I expected." On the bed, Daniel didn't move. His eyes remained closed, his face pale and still, as though he were completely unaware of the world around him. But deep inside, somewhere beyond the silence, his mind flickered. Emma glanced at him briefly, her smile fading for just a second. The sound of the monitor seemed louder in that moment, almost accusing. She looked away quickly and continued her call. "Yes, I'll handle it," she whispered, lowering her voice. "Just trust me." A nurse passed by the open door and slowed down, her eyes lingering on Emma. There was something unsettling about the contrast, the unconscious man fighting for his life, and the woman beside him giggling as if nothing were wrong. The nurse frowned slightly but said nothing, continuing down the hallway. Inside the room, Emma ended the call and let out a long breath. The smile disappeared from her face as quickly as it had come. For a moment, she just stood there in silence, staring at Daniel. "You always had to make things complicated," she murmured under her breath. She pulled a chair closer and sat down, her gaze fixed on his still face. Memories seemed to pass through her mind, moments of laughter, arguments, promises. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the bed. "You weren't supposed to end up like this," she said quietly. The monitor beeped steadily in response, offering no answers. Emma stood up again, restless. She walked toward the window and stared out at the gray sky. Rain had begun to fall, tapping softly against the glass. It felt like the world outside was mirroring the storm building inside her. Suddenly, the door creaked open. A doctor stepped in, his expression calm but serious. He glanced at the monitors, then at Emma. "Are you family?" he asked. Emma hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding. "Yes, I'm his wife." The doctor studied her face carefully, as if trying to read something unspoken. Then he sighed. "His condition is critical," he said. "There hasn't been much improvement. We're doing everything we can, but the next 24 hours will be crucial." Emma nodded slowly, her eyes fixed on the floor. "He'll wake up," she said, almost as if convincing herself. "He has to." The doctor didn't respond immediately. Instead, he adjusted a setting on one of the machines and gave her a sympathetic look before leaving the room. Silence returned. Emma walked back to the bed and looked down at Daniel again. This time, there was no smile, no distraction. Just a heavy, uncomfortable truth settling in. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She stared at the screen, her expression tightening. The name flashing there made her heart race. For a moment, she considered ignoring it. But she didn't. She answered. "Yes," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. There was a pause on the other end, followed by a low voice that made her grip the phone tighter. "Is it done?" the voice asked. Emma glanced at Daniel, then turned her back to him, lowering her voice even further. "Not yet," she replied, "but it will be soon." Her words hung in the air like a dark secret. Behind her, something changed. A faint, almost imperceptible movement. Daniel's finger twitched. Emma didn't notice. The monitor let out a slightly sharper beep, but it quickly returned to its steady rhythm. Daniel's mind, buried beneath layers of unconsciousness, began to stir. Sounds reached him in fragments, the echo of Emma's voice, the distant hum of machines, the unfamiliar tension in the air. And though his body remained still, somewhere deep inside, he was waking up. Slowly, silently, and just in time. The night deepened around the hospital, and the soft glow of fluorescent lights cast long shadows across the quiet room. The rain outside grew heavier, tapping insistently against the windows as if trying to break through the silence. Emma stood with her back to Daniel, her voice barely audible as she continued the call. "I told you, it's under control," she whispered, her tone tense now. "You just need to be patient." The voice on the other end responded sharply, though its words were indistinct. Emma's grip on the phone tightened, her knuckles turning pale. "No," she said quickly. "No mistakes. I won't let that happen." She ended the call abruptly and stood still for a moment, her breathing uneven. Slowly, she turned back toward the bed. Daniel looked exactly the same, motionless, silent, fragile. But something had changed. The steady rhythm of the heart monitor seemed slightly faster now, its beeping more urgent than before. Emma frowned, stepping closer. "Daniel," she said softly, as if testing the sound of his name. There was no response. She leaned in, studying his face carefully. For a split second, she thought she saw something, a flicker beneath his eyelids. But then it was gone. "You're imagining things," she muttered to herself, shaking her head. Still, unease crept into her chest. She pulled the chair closer again and sat down, this time watching him more closely. The playful, careless expression she had worn earlier was completely gone. In its place was something colder, calculating. "You always were stronger than people thought," she said quietly. "But not this time." The words sounded almost like a warning. Minutes passed. The room remained still, except for the machines and the distant sound of footsteps in the hallway. Then, a faint movement. Daniel's fingers twitched again, this time more clearly. Emma froze. Her eyes locked onto his hand. "No," she whispered. Another twitch. This time, there was no doubt. She stood up abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. Her heart pounded in her chest as she stared at him, fear creeping into her expression. "Daniel," she said again, louder now. His eyelids fluttered. The movement was weak, almost imperceptible, but it was there. Emma stumbled back a step, shaking her head as if refusing to believe what she was seeing. "This isn't possible," she murmured. The monitor's beeping grew faster, more erratic. Daniel's breathing shifted, becoming less mechanical, more his own. And then, his eyes opened, just slightly. Blurred, unfocused, struggling to recognize the world around him. But open. Emma's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, neither of them moved. Daniel's gaze drifted slowly, his vision hazy, until it landed on her. He couldn't speak. He couldn't move. But his eyes were awake. And they were watching her. Emma forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Daniel, it's me," she said, her voice trembling despite her effort to sound calm. "You're okay. You're safe." Inside, panic was rising. Had he heard anything? Had he understood? Her mind raced. Daniel's lips parted slightly, as if trying to form a word, but no sound came out. His brow furrowed. Faintly, confusion and pain flickering across his face. He was trying to remember. Trying to understand. Emma stepped closer, her movements slow and controlled. "You need to rest," she said softly, placing a hand on the bed railing. "Don't try to speak." But her eyes betrayed her. They kept darting to the door, to the machines, back to him. Calculating, measuring, deciding. Daniel's gaze didn't leave her. Something deep inside him stirred, not just awareness, but a feeling. A faint, unsettling sense that something wasn't right. He couldn't explain it. He couldn't even think clearly. But he felt it. Emma noticed the way he was looking at her. Not with relief, not with love, but with something else. Doubt. Her expression hardened for just a fraction of a second before she masked it again. "You're going to be fine," she said firmly, as if trying to convince both of them. The door suddenly opened. A nurse rushed in, alerted by the changes in the monitor. "Oh my God, he's waking up," she said quickly, moving to Daniel's side and checking his vitals. Emma stepped back, her face pale but composed. Is that a good sign?" she asked, forcing concern into her voice. The nurse nodded, focused on her work. "It could be, but we need to monitor him closely." More footsteps echoed in the hallway as additional staff were called in. The room filled with urgency. But in the middle of it all, Daniel's eyes remained fixed on Emma. And Emma, despite everything, couldn't shake the feeling that the situation was slipping out of her control. Because whatever Daniel had heard, whatever he had felt, it hadn't disappeared. It had only just begun. The room buzzed with urgency as more medical staff gathered around Daniel. The once quiet space was now filled with movement, monitors beeping faster, hushed instructions being exchanged, and the sharp scent of antiseptic in the air. Emma stood off to the side, her arms crossed tightly, her mind racing faster than the machines beside him. "He's responding," one of the doctors said. "That's a good sign. Let's keep him stable." A nurse adjusted the IV line while another checked his oxygen levels. Daniel's eyes remained open now, though still heavy and unfocused. Every breath he took seemed like a battle, but he was here, awake, aware, and watching. Watching her. Emma forced herself to stay calm, to look like the concerned wife everyone expected her to be. But inside, something was cracking. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not yet. Not like this. "Can he hear us?" she asked carefully, her voice measured. The doctor glanced at her briefly. "Possibly. Patients in this condition can sometimes hear and process more than we realize." Her stomach dropped. Daniel's gaze shifted slightly, following the sound of her voice again. There was a faint tension in his expression now, as if he were trying to piece together something broken in his mind. Fragments. Words. A voice. Not yet, but it will be soon. The memory echoed faintly in his consciousness, distorted but persistent. Emma noticed the change in his eyes. He wasn't just looking at her anymore. He was thinking, and that terrified her. "I need some air," she said suddenly, stepping back toward the door. "I'll be right outside." No one stopped her. All attention remained on Daniel. As she stepped into the hallway, the door closing softly behind her, her calm expression shattered. She pressed a hand against the wall, her breathing quick and uneven. "This is bad, this is really bad," she whispered to herself. Her phone was already in her hand before she even realized it. She dialed. The call connected almost instantly. "He woke up," she said in a low, urgent voice. Earlier than expected. A pause. Then the same cold voice from before responded, sharper this time. "That's a problem. I know that," Emma snapped, glancing nervously down the hallway. "You said we had time." "Then fix it," the voice replied. Emma's grip tightened around the phone. "It's not that simple anymore," she hissed. "There are doctors, nurses." "Then make it simple," the voice interrupted. "Or everything falls apart." The line went dead. Emma lowered the phone slowly, her heart pounding in her ears. For a moment, she just stood there, frozen between fear and decision. Then her expression changed. The fear didn't disappear, but it hardened into something colder. More determined. Inside the room, Daniel's condition was stabilizing. His breathing had improved slightly, and the frantic pace of the monitors began to slow. The doctors seemed cautiously optimistic, exchanging quiet nods as they continued their work. "He's strong," one of them said. "Stronger than we thought." Daniel's eyes moved again, scanning the room weakly. But Emma wasn't there. A flicker of confusion crossed his face. Then something else. Relief. Small, but real. As if her absence made the air easier to breathe. Moments later, the door opened again. Emma walked back in, but something about her was different now. Her posture was straighter. Her expression calmer. Too calm. "Is he okay?" she asked, stepping closer. The doctor nodded. "He's stable for now. This could be a turning point." Emma smiled faintly. "That's wonderful," she said. But her eyes didn't match her words. They were fixed on Daniel, studying him, measuring every movement, every breath. Daniel felt it. That same uneasy feeling from before. Only stronger now. His fingers twitched again, more deliberately this time. A signal. A warning. Or maybe, resistance. Emma noticed. Of course she did. She moved closer to the bed, leaning in just enough so that only he could see her face clearly. For a moment, the mask slipped. Her smile faded, and in its place was something chilling. "You should have stayed asleep," she whispered so quietly that no one else could hear. Daniel's eyes widened, just slightly. But it was enough. Because in that moment, everything became clear. Not fully. Not completely. But enough to know one thing for certain. The person standing beside him was not there to save him. And whatever was coming next would be far more dangerous than the thing that had already nearly taken his life. The room felt colder after Emma's whisper, as if the air itself had turned against Daniel. The machines continued their steady rhythm, but now every sound seemed sharper, more urgent, like a countdown. Daniel couldn't move much, couldn't speak, but his mind was clearer now. The fog was lifting, slowly but surely. And with it came fragments of memory, Emma's voice, her words, the strange tone she had used on the phone. "You should have stayed asleep." The sentence echoed inside him. Fear crept in, but something else rose with it. Determination. Across the room, the doctor finished checking the monitors. He's stable, he said. We'll reduce sedation gradually. If progress continues, he may be able to speak soon. Emma's smile returned instantly. That's amazing news, she said, her voice perfectly controlled. But inside, panic surged again. Speak. That was the one thing she couldn't allow. Can I stay with him? She asked softly. The doctor nodded. For a few minutes. But he needs rest. As the staff slowly began to leave, the room quieted once again. The door clicked shut. Now it was just the two of them. Emma stepped closer, her heels barely making a sound on the floor. She looked down at Daniel, her expression unreadable. You're stronger than I thought, she said quietly. I'll give you that. Daniel stared back at her, his breathing shallow but steady. His fingers twitched again, this time with purpose. Slowly, painfully, he shifted his hand toward the side of the bed. Emma noticed, but didn't stop him. Not yet. You're probably wondering why, she continued, her voice calm, almost reflective. Why this happened. Why I'm here. She leaned slightly closer. It was never about you, she whispered. It was about what you had. The money. The control. The freedom. Her words were cold, stripped of any emotion. Daniel's hand finally reached the edge of the bed. And just beyond it, a small button. The nurse call button. Emma's eyes followed the movement. For a split second, their gazes locked. A silent battle. Then, Daniel pressed it. A sharp beep cut through the silence. Emma's expression shattered. No, she gasped, stepping back. Footsteps echoed in the hallway almost immediately. The door swung open. A nurse rushed in, followed by the doctor. What happened? The doctor asked quickly. Daniel's eyes shifted desperately between them and Emma. His lips moved weakly, struggling to form words. Emma stepped back further, her calm completely gone now. He's confused, she said quickly. He doesn't know what he's doing. Daniel forced a sound out. A broken whisper. Phone. The nurse frowned. What? Phone, he struggled. The doctor's expression changed instantly. Get security, he said sharply. Emma froze. No, you're misunderstanding, she began, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. Within seconds, two security guards appeared at the door. Ma'am, we need you to step outside, one of them said firmly. Emma's eyes darted around the room, searching for a way out, a way to regain control. But there was none. As they escorted her toward the door, she turned back to Daniel one last time. The fear in her eyes had been replaced by something else. Defeat. The door closed behind her. And just like that, the danger was gone. The room felt quiet again, but this time, it felt different. Lighter. Safer. The doctor stepped closer to Daniel, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. You did well, he said gently. You're safe now. Daniel's eyes slowly closed, exhaustion finally overtaking him. But this time, it wasn't the darkness of danger. It was the peace of survival. Days later, the truth came to light. Emma's secret calls, her plans, her intentions, they were all uncovered. What had once been hidden in whispers was now undeniable. Daniel survived. Not just the illness, but the betrayal. And though the scars, both physical and emotional, would take time to heal, one thing was certain. He had been given a second chance. A chance not just to live, but to see clearly. Moral. Sometimes, the greatest danger doesn't come from strangers, but from the people we trust the most. True strength is not just surviving the storm, but recognizing who stood with you, and who tried to let you fall.